Divisibility tests. Your learning goal. I can tell if a number is divisible by 2, 4, or 8 without actually dividing it. For each field day, each student needs a partner. Which numbers of participants shown in the image above would make that possible, and which would not? And how do you know? So, because everybody needs to have a partner, that means they're all going to be arranged in groups of 2. So if everybody's arranged in groups of 2, that means every number needs to be a multiple of 2. So I could eliminate 79 and 157 because they're not multiples of 2. That leaves me with just a few more to look through and try to figure out which ones are divisible. So I'm looking for divisibility by 2. If I take a look at the number 92, the fact that it has a 2 in the final position, in this case is going to be a good indication that it is divisible. Any number that ends in an even number, any number that is an even number, is divisible by 2. But just to go through a little bit of an exploration here, I know that, say, 2 times 40 is 80. That's pretty easy to figure out. And I also happen to know then that it's not hard to get that 2 times 45 is equal to 90. Well, 90 obviously very close to 2, so that means 2 times 46 is going to be equal to 92. So clearly 92 is divisible by 2. If you take 92 and divide it by 2, you get 46. So how about 144? Well, 144, if you remember your times tables, is 12 times 12. Since 12 times 12 is 2 times 6, we know that right away, since we've got a 2 being multiplied by everything in the equation, therefore 144 can be divided by 2, and if we divide it by 2, we end up with 72. So 144 is also divisible by 2. And 38, if I didn't know right off the top of my head what 38 divided by 2 was, I could say, well, I know that 2 times 15 is equal to 30, and I'm close, so I need to get to 8, so that means 2 times 19 is equal to 38. So 38 divided by 2 is equal to 19. Party planner must decide whether to use tables of 4 or tables of 8 for some parties. She wants each table to be full with no leftover guests. For which numbers of guests above will tables of 8 work? Which numbers of guests above will tables of 4 work? And then explain your thinking. Let's start with the number 228. Well, I'm not exactly sure where to start, so I'm going to say, well, I know that 4 times 25 is equal to 100. So that tells me then that 4 times 50 would be equal to 200, because I've just doubled the 25 so that I had 50, so now 4 times 50 equals 200, so I'm getting close. And 228 then is 200 plus 28, and I know that 28 is 4 times 7. So that means if I put all of my multiplications together here, I could say the whole thing was 4 times 50, which gives me 200, plus 4 times 7. Another way of writing that would be it's 4 times 50 plus 7, or 4 times 57. So I can say definitely that 228 is divisible by 4. Now, the next step is to say, well, is it divisible by 8? If I back up to one of the steps here, where I did 4 times 50 equals 200, I could also say that was 4 times 2 times 25 is equal to 200. So that's the same as 8 times 25 being equal to 200. However, I've still got the 28 left over, and there's no number that you multiply something times 8 will give you 25. No whole number, right? Because 4 gives you 32, so that doesn't help us. And 3 gives us 24, so that doesn't help us. So based on that, it doesn't look like 228 is divisible by 8. So we're still not getting to exactly where we'd like to be. So 8 times 25 got us to 200. What about 8 times 26? Well, I know I'm just adding another 8 in there. So that takes us to 208. 8 times 27 would be 216. 8 times 28 would be 224. And 8 times 29 would be 232. So right in the middle is where I wanted to end up. So if I was making tables of 8, I would end up with, I could have 28 tables of 8, but I would still have one table of 4 left over. Because you can see if we're trying to get to 228, and these tables have only given us 224, we've got 228 minus 224, leaving us 4 people left over. So it is not divisible by 8. How about 155? Well, one of the key things to take into account when looking at a number like 155 is that it is an odd number, right? So it's ending in a 5. Because we're working with both 8 and 4, 8 and 4 are multiples of 2, so any multiple of 8 and 4 also has to be a multiple of 2. 155 is not a multiple of 2, so we can say very clearly that it doesn't work for either of them. How about 352? Well, I know that 4 times 8 is equal to 32, so 4 times 80 would be equal to 320. So 352 could be 4 times 80 plus 32. So then the question is 32 divisible by 4? And of course 32 is 4 times 8. So it's just like in the last question where we had 352 is equal to 4 times 80 plus 4 times 8, which can be written as 4 times 80 plus 8, which is 4 times 88. So very clearly, if 4 times 88 means that yes, 352 is divisible by 4. Now, how about 8? Well, I learned something from looking at this 4 times 80. That also tells me that 8 times 40 will also be 320. If I'm trying to get to 352, then I can have 8 times 40 plus the remaining 32. And then I have the same question, is 32 divisible by 8? And of course, I learned down here that it is. So 4 times 8 is 32. So I have the same situation, 8 times 40 plus 4. So if I take 352 people and divide them into tables of 8, I would have 44 tables. So just to keep track of our results, the first one, 428, was divisible by 4. 155 is not divisible by either. 352 is divisible by 4 and 8. And now what about 104? Well, as we previously talked about, 4 times 25 is equal to 100. So 104 is equal to 4 times 25 plus an additional 4. So that tells us that we've got 4 times 26 tables. So 104 was divisible by 4. We determined that 104 was equal to 26 times 4. Now the question is 104 divisible by 8? And because we've learned this already, we can actually use that information to help us in determining its divisibility by 8. If 26 times 4 is equal to 104, I can take the 26 and break that into 2 times 13, and then multiply that by 4. Because 2 times 13 is 26, multiplied by 4, it's the same. I can also then rearrange all of that. I can take out the brackets, so I can have 13 times 2 times 4. And then I can rearrange or do the multiplication in a slightly different order. I can do my 2 and 4, multiply them together, so I have 13 times 8. By doing that rearrangement, I can see now that I've got a multiple of 8, so 104 is divisible by both 4 and 8. Now the final number, 446. Well, I'm not exactly sure where to go with that one, so I'll just start messing around with some numbers. So 440, if if I wanted to get 440, I know that that could be 4 times 11, which would give me 44, times 10, which gives me 440. So then I'm close. I just need to add 6 more. So I can rewrite that. Again, if I do a little bit of reorganizing here, I can go and multiply those out. So I've got 4 times 11 times 10. 11 times 10 is 110. And then plus my 6. I can see then that if I take the 6 is a 4 plus 2, so that's another 4 that I can pull out. So I've got 4 times 111, which of course if I think about it, 4 times 111 gives me 444, which is pretty darn close to where I want it to be. But I'm ending up with this plus 2 at the end. So since it's not another nice plus 4, it means I can't add another one in there, so I end up with 2 people left over. So I can say that 446 is not divisible by 4. Well, but how about 8? So if I back up a little bit, I'm skeptical that if it doesn't work for 4, that it's probably not going to work for 8, but you never know. So let's go and check it out. So if I back up to this step here, where I had 4 times 110 plus 6, I could break that up into 4 times 2 times 55, because 55 is half of 110. And then I can do the 8 times 55, because I've taken the 4 and the 2 and multiplied them together to get 8. But I've still got 8 times 55 plus 6. And since the 6 is not an 8, it means I end up with 55 tables of 8 and 6 people left over. So again, it's not working either way. So I'd have to say that 446 is not divisible by either. How does deciding whether a number is odd or even help you decide if it's divisible by 2, 4, or 8? Well, the immediate answer is that if the number is odd, it won't be divisible by any of those. Because in order to be divisible by 4 or 8, it has to be divisible by 2 as well. And so if a number is odd, it cannot be divisible by 2. If a number is odd, it cannot be divided by 2, and therefore it can't be divided by 4 or 8 either. Because remember, 4 is 2 times 2, and 8 is 2 times 4, which means that whatever number you ended up with would also, if it was divisible by 4 and 8, it would, by definition, be also divisible by 2. Suppose you figure out that a number is divisible by 8. Do you need to do a test to see if it is divisible by 2 or 4? So the answer is no. If a number is divisible by 8, then by definition, it is also divisible by 4 and 2, because 8 is simply 4 times 2. Suppose you know two numbers are 8 apart. Could one number be a multiple of 8, but not the other number? Well, the answer again is no. If two numbers are 8 apart, and the first number is a multiple of 8, then the second one is also going to be a multiple of 8. Let's look at a couple of examples. It'll probably make it more obvious. 3 times 8 is equal to 24. Now, if we said that the second number is 8 apart from it, that would mean the second number would be 32. But if we've added 8 to it, what we've really said that instead of having 3 8s, we've actually got 4 8s. And of course, 4 times 8 is 32. Look at that again. If we had 32 and we added 8 to it, that would take us to 40. However, that is the same as if we just added one more 8 into our multiplication, so that instead of 4 8s, we have 5 8s, which again comes out to this answer of 40. So if one number is a multiple of 8, then any number that is 8 apart from it will also be a multiple of 8. How could you decompose 5048 to make it easier to decide if it's divisible by 4? Decomposing a number, there are always going to be many ways to do that. In this case, the first thing I looked at is, I know I'm dealing with 4, and that's kind of a familiar thing because 4s and 4 times 25 is 100. I'm always familiar with that because of counting money. So the first thing I noticed, though, is I've got a 48 at the end, and at 48 I remember that 6 times 8 is 48. And I know that, obviously, 8 is 4 times 2. So 6 times 4 times 2 is equal to 48. And I could rearrange things a little bit here to say that 6 times 2 times 4 is equal to 48. And when I combine those, I end up with 12 times 4 is equal to 48. So if you remembered your 12 times tables, you could have got to that point much more quickly. So I know that 48 is divisible by 4. There are 12 of them. What about then what's left over? So I started off with 5,048. I take out the 48, and I'm left with 5,000. Is 5,000 divisible by 4? Well, now I remember that 4 times 25 is equal to 100. Now if I want to get from 100 up to 5,000, I'm going to multiply by 50. So that means 4 times 25 times 50 is going to be equal to 5,000. Now I want everything to be just a multiple of 4, so then I have to look at this and think, well, is there a way that I can get from 25 times 50? That's not maybe immediately obvious, but again, if you think in terms of simplifying it a little bit, you know that this is 25 times 5 times 10, because I can break the 50 into 5 times 10. So I've got 4 times 25 times 5 times 10. Well, 5 times 25 is not actually that hard if you don't remember it off the top of your head. We know that 4 times 25 is 100, and now if we've got 5 of them, we're just adding in one more 25, so that's 125. And then multiplying by 10, we just tack a 0 on the end. So what we really end up with then is 4 times 1250, 1,1250, is equal to 5,000. So what I end up with is 4 times 12 plus 4 times 1,250 is equal to 5,048. I can then change that to say 4 times 12 plus 1,250. And I can simplify it to say 4 times 1250 plus 12 is 1,262. From that, I can see that 5,048 is divisible by 4. The result is 1,262. Lesson summary. A number is divisible by 2 if it can be arranged into 2 equal groups of whole numbers. For example, 2, 4, 6, 8, and so on are all divisible by 2. You can make a list of numbers divisible by 2 by starting at 2 and adding 2. So 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, and so on. The last digit is always 2, 4, 6, 8, or 0. The numbers we call even are all divisible by 2. A number is divisible by 4 if it can be arranged into 4 equal groups of whole numbers. For example, 4, 8, 12, 16, and so on are all divisible by 4. Numbers that are divisible by 4 are multiples of 4. 4, 8, 12, 16, 20, 24, 28, and so on. Every multiple of 4 is the double of an even number. That means one way to figure out if a number is divisible by 4 is to take half of it. If that half is even, then the number is divisible by 4. There's a way to figure out if a greater number is divisible by 4 without dividing. 100 is divisible by 4 because it's the same as 4 times 25. That means any number of hundreds can also be shown in groups of 4. For example, 200 is 2 times 100, so that is 2 times 4 times 25. And 300 is 3 times 100, so that's 3 times 4 times 25. All groups of hundreds are divisible by 4. The same is true for groups of thousands, 10,000s, 100,000s, and so on. So, to decide if any number is divisible by 4, you can look only at the part of the number in the tens and ones places and decide whether or not that is a multiple of 4. For example, 384 is a multiple of 4, since 300 is made up of groups of 4, 3 times 25 times 4, and 84 is also made up of groups of 4, 21 times 4. However, 386 is not a multiple of 4, since 300 is made up of groups of 4, but 86 is not. A number is divisible by 8 if it can be arranged into 8 equal groups of whole numbers. For example, 8, 16, 24, 32, and so on are all divisible by 8. Numbers that are divisible by 8 are multiples of 8. 8, 16, 24, 32, 40, 48, 56, and so on. Every multiple of 8 is the double of a multiple of 4. That means one way to figure out if a number is divisible by 8 is to take half of it. If that half is divisible by 4, then the number is divisible by 8. There's a way to figure out if a greater number is divisible by 8 without dividing. 1000 is divisible by 8 because it's the same as 8 times 125. That means any number of thousands can also be shown in groups of 8. For example, 2000 is 2 times 1000, so that's 2 times 8 times 125. And 3000 is 3 times 1000, so that's 3 times 8 times 125. All groups of thousands are divisible by 8. The same is true for groups of 10,000s, 100,000s, and so on. So, to decide if any number is divisible by 8, you can look only at the part of the number in the hundreds, tens, and ones places, and decide whether or not that is a multiple of 8. For example, to see if 384 is a multiple of 8, take half of it. 384 divided by 2 is 192. Now, to see if 192 is divisible by 4, look at the tens and ones places. 92 is a multiple of 4, because 4 times 23 is 92. So 384 is divisible by 8. However, 390 is not a multiple of 8, since half of it is 195. 195 cannot be a multiple of 4 because it is an odd number. Key terms. Divisible. Whole number A is divisible by whole number B if A can be divided by B without a remainder. Even number. A whole number that can be grouped into two equal groups. For example, 100 is even because 100 is equal to 50 plus 50. There are two groups of exactly the same number, 50. Multiple. The product of two whole numbers. For example, 12 is a multiple of 4, because 3 times 4 equals 12. Odd number. A whole number that cannot be grouped into two equal groups. For example, 101 is odd because 101 equals 50 plus 50, but there's 1 left over. Remainder. The number left over when you divide. For example, in 36 divided by 5, the result is 7 with a remainder of 1. So 1 is the remainder. Your turn.